What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video, and it's a rare Sunday video as I go over kind of my sealed pool and everything for the 2-slot sealed RCQ event that I went to at Sylvan Factory Games in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The total event overall was a lot of fun to play. The format is pretty amazing, and the shop and all the players that I got to interact with and meet with and get to talk to and everything were super pleasant. So I'm going to kind of, for this video, kind of go and break down, kind of my sealed pool, what it looked like. Obviously I have a picture of my sealed deck here and kind of how the event went in totality. But of course, before I get too deep into any of that stuff, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me, I post a lot of Modern and Pioneer content and the occasional longer form video as well. I try to do those at least once a week, have a little bit of something for everyone. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. This is a free, easy way to support my channel, and of course I have channel memberships as well. So if you'd like to support me even further, get access to some cool perks and some other cool perks in the future as well, please be sure to do that as well if you so choose to. So the sealed event was Outlaws at Thunder Junction sealed with a draft in the top 8. That is kind of the standard for a sealed RCQ or like a sealed qualifier event. So as I was kind of like opening my packs and everything, this is like my first sealed event with the RCQ kind of like format. I don't think it really changes too much from like the PBTQ and the Star City Games Invitational, stuff like that, back when those were being ran. But it was different nonetheless because it's my first like sealed event in a long time. I think Battle for Zendikar was like the last time that I had played in like a sealed like qualifier event, and I've played in some Grand Prix that had sealed, like team sealed, but as far as like a solo sealed event, like this is like the first one in quite a long time. So to kind of give an overview of like what my sealed pool looked like as I was kind of per the judges and everything, not looking and gawking over like what cards were actually open either by you or like the person sitting across from you, since you have to basically confirm that none of your packs are like really weird, that you're not like missing anything, and then passing it along to your opponent. You get their sealed pool and everything. You're watching them while they open, making sure they have all their cards that they need, and then going and like confirming how many copies of each card they have, and then basically confirming that they got your pool correct, and then going into deck building. So as I was kind of opening up my packs, again, not really looking too deep into what was going on, I noticed the Stoic Sphinx, which is pictured in the 4th row top column, which is a 2 generic and 2 blue for a flying creature that has 5 power, 3 toughness, and it has hexproof as long as you haven't cast a spell this turn, and it has flash. So that card easily is like the MVP of the deck. Stoic Sphinx just a lot of times got cast on my opponent's end step, and while they were tapped out, and then it just got to attack for 5 every turn, and I got to leave up interaction. I had a few good interactive spells like Failed Fording, Ariette's Lullaby to punish them for attacking, and trying to be pretty aggressive while being able to gain a little bit of life. Scorching Shot ended up being a very good pull, dealing 5 damage to target creature, even though it was like sorcery speed. Not super ideal when you want the Sphinx to have hexproof, but worked out very well, getting rid of a lot of big creatures, and as well as Stop Cold to kind of like tap their creature, their best creature down, remove all of its abilities. So even if it had something it could try to activate, something like Rakdos, which was like super huge, and it was like probably one of the best cards that you could open in the set. We had like an answer to that card as well. Another one being Malcolm the Eyes, which was a 2 mana, a red and a blue 2/2 flying haste creature that whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you got to investigate. So we had a pretty decent, and I saw Hypothesis as well, so already kind of had the makings of like, okay, if blue-red is pretty decent, we're going to move into it. So again, not really paying attention to anything else that's in the pack and whatnot. We finally get past back our pool. I'm looking through, and essentially in this format, and what I saw from a lot of people is that you were going to want to splash a 3rd color in kind of like the sealed kind of event, and that makes sense for the most part because it's kind of hard to be a 2-color deck and have a lot of really good 2-color cards unless you have a lot of good double X and double Y casting cards in your deck where you don't want to necessarily have that third color if you don't need it. Thankfully for me, I opened it up. My mana ended up being like great because I had Eroded Canyon, Abraded Bluffs, and Lonely Arroyo, which are essentially like the trio of lands where, you know, I have the blue-red dual land, the red-white dual land, and the white-blue dual land. So it was almost like given that I would actually end up being in white, and really I kind of ended up being more blue-white than blue-red, even though having the Apothesizzle and the Malcolm the Eyes. We also had Conduit Pylons. It was like a way that we can kind of smooth out our draws, got to Surveil, added a colorless mana, didn't really have a lot of cards, I would say, that were like double of like a certain cost, you know, like the double blue. I will admit there was times that it was awkward with some draws, even though we were playing 7 islands, 2 plains, and a mountain in our deck. There was definitely some times where we ended up drawing like 2 or 3 mountains, or drew both plains before we saw like second island, which is a little rough because, again, you know, we have, you know, 9, 10 potential blue sources in our deck, which might be a little bit on the low end, but again, I wanted to make sure that I had double red more often. I was playing so many blue spells that, you know, by turn 4, I really wanted to have like double blue, and it wasn't necessarily super important that I had blue mana on that turn, so I was kind of happy with whatever. But you know, there was like one or two games where it was like slightly awkward, but thankfully it didn't end up mattering. So we kind of tried to go for this theme where we were, you know, early on we wanted to play, you know, this little game of like getting to cast multiple spells, preferably on our opponent's turn, so we could get some of the benefit from Stoic Sphinx, like maintaining hexproof, our opponent wanting to kind of tap out and play things on their turn, while we were able to kind of, you know, do something on their end step, you know, while on our turn getting some of the benefits of like Gem Lightfoot to get to draw a card since we didn't cast a card from our hand, and Inventive Wingsmith to also get like a flying counter, so to have a decent amount of flyers in the deck. While also, if we cast spells on our turn, you know, we made them matter, like something like a Marauding Sphinx, Djinn of Fool's Fall ended up having a plot on it, so we were able to kind of play it and still get the benefits of Gem Lightfoot and Inventive Wingsmith. And again, just kind of fulfill Stoic Sphinx's need of like having hexproof, because we can always attack and then second main phase do it, and make sure that we get in our damage with the Sphinx, or our opponent decides to leave up mana on our turn. We also had a really cool combination with Forma Posse, where we could end up making, you know, a bunch of 1/1 mercenaries if the game went long enough, and then having Slick Shot Lockpicker on plot, to where we could decide to just form a posse, flash it back. And there was actually a game where I had made 7 1/1s on my turn and ended up getting to block for a few turns, with my opponent playing, I would say decently passively, but probably necessary that they did, to then only flashback form a posse and make like 10 mercenaries, and then be able to kind of attack through a lot of their big flying reach creatures to end up getting through the last few points of damage. I've also gotten to flashback a Hypothesizzle as well, getting to draw 2 cards, and then discarding a non-land card, dealing 4 damage to a creature, committing a crime, getting rid of some decently big things on the board, while also, you know, kind of like filtering my draws a little bit, ensuring that I hit my land drops, was pretty sweet. So to kind of go through some of the games I played, that's kind of, you know, the idea of the deck. I thought for sure that it was going to be a little bit awkward with some, like a lot of my cards wanting to be, you know, not casting spells from your hand to get some sort of benefit, and then having like Malcolm, where I want to play 2 spells a turn, where I want to also cast stuff like Scorching Shot and Ariette's Lullaby, which are sorceries, and, you know, playing like Outlaw Medics and some of these other flyers and stuff that didn't have flash. I thought maybe would be kind of awkward, but it actually didn't feel that bad, as there was a decent amount of like flash threats, along with things that we could do at instant speed to kind of play on our opponent's turn to get some of the benefits of not playing spells, and again, having a decent amount of, you know, plot creatures and plot things to do to end up, you know, getting some value that way. And Slickshot Lockpicker being even better for the fact that this is one of like the scenarios where we could have Gem Lightfoot and Malcolm in play, and we can investigate and then also get to draw a card at the end step as well with Gem, you know, giving something flashback and then getting to flash it back, which was really neat. So game one, I ended up playing against some sort of Esper deck. It seemed like a pretty aggressive, white and black deck, kind of splashing the blue in it. Game one, my opponent mulliganed to 5, and we had a pretty aggressive, flying start. Game two, we ended up mulliganing to, I believe, 5. And we ended up having like 2 lands, one of them being a surveil land, and we just never hit our 3rd land. Ended up losing that game. And then the next game, we played Stoic Sphinx on turn 4, got to untap, and repeatedly hit our opponent for a ton of damage before they could really get anything going, and then getting to just close out the game by kind of tempoing them out, which you'll notice with this deck is kind of what we were going for. The second match, we played against a green-white, sort of kind of like mounts deck. Game one, we ended up, I won, I would say, pretty easily again, just kind of, getting to play some big flyers and our opponent not really being able to take them out of the sky. No removal that I had seen, or at least like none of the fight spells that I had seen, or like any big reachers. So we were just able to kind of, curve 2-mana flyer into 3-mana flyer, 4-mana flyer, 5-mana flyer, and just kind of close out the game that way. Game two, we almost went to time, and it was a very dicey game. My opponent kept getting low on life. Then they were playing the spells to kind of gain a little bit more life. Then they were stabilizing the board and everything. And it got to a pretty dicey situation. But thankfully, we were able to pull it out at the end 2-0 and start the tournament 2-0 as well, after playing a really close game two. Again, just playing a bunch of flyers and playing pretty strategically to the board, playing relatively safe, and then kind of going for a play where we put our opponent super low rather than trying to go all in to avoid a potential blowout, while still leaving enough creatures back to not die to anything unless they had something like absolutely insane. So we ended up starting the tournament 2-0. Round 3 is where things started to get a little rough. So round 3, played against Yo-Man 5, which he's a very good player. And I felt pretty good because we ended up winning game 1. The same thing where we had like a pretty nice curve of, playing, Malcolm Has Eyes on turn 2, to like playing a Wolverine on turn 3, getting to attack with Malcolm over those turns, and then having another turn where we were able to play the Wolverine, go get end up exiling a land, playing a land, and playing a 4-mana spell as well to trigger Malcolm to get, store up some potential cards for later in the game, and just getting to attack with a bunch of flyers. By the time that they were able to kind of like stabilize the board and everything, I just had too many flyers that were ended up being lethal. And game 2 and game 3, I absolutely got run over. Just deck didn't seem to want to cooperate on kind of like the disruption front, and green and red's creatures are just a lot better than a lot of like the white and blue creatures. So just ended up kind of getting run over. Didn't seem to matter, but I was still in pretty high hopes going into round 4, because again, we kind of we ended up playing against a really good player and playing against another great player as well. And they had a nice green-blue deck, and again, getting Bristly Bill in my opponent's like seal pool was absolutely insane. One game one, pretty close. That was the game where we played Form a Posse for 7 and then flashed it back for like 9 or 10 and ended up being able to kind of squeak out game 1. Game 2, they ended up mulliganing to 5 or 6, and they ended up actually winning that game. A little bit on Bristly Bill, another bit on just being able to kind of stabilize the board, gain some life, and stop my flyers from getting in. And game 3 was just more of the same, just absolutely, just not a good time, not a good time overall. So losing to 2 out of the 3 green decks that we played against, going from 2-0 to 2-2, not particularly exciting, and not high hopes for wanting to make the elimination rounds of the tournament. So while X2, at least at the time, I thought that maybe 1 or 2 would get in, is kind of an uphill battle. Breakers were kind of decent, going into it. As we went to round 5, played against a green-black-white deck, and my opponent had some pretty good like crime committing cards, and a lot of what ended up happening, we got to game 3. He mulliganed game 1, I mulliganed in game 2. Game 3, I believe we both kept 7, and it was just another thing of just tap out to play like a 4-drop, and I untap, play Sphinx, I untap, attack them, and then am able to just leave up mana for the rest of the game. I got to resolve a Marauding Sphinx, I think, on that turn 5. So, giving up Hexproof on the Sphinx, even though it doesn't really matter because they were tapped out. And just from that point on, just getting to, attack for 8, neutralize a threat on their own turn, when they were tapped out, and then hitting them for another 8, and then getting to kind of smooth out my draws with Sphinx, and then just ultimately ending the game thanks to Stoic and Marauding Sphinx, which are absolute houses in this format. Absolutely insane. 3-2 going into the last round. I believe we were in 12th place, and basically the top 6 places got to draw into top 8. So there's 2 spots left. There's reasonably 6 people playing for that spot. So definitely needed to win and sweat in the last round. And I actually got paired against the person who had checked my sealed pool, and we did our swap and everything like that. And meeting at the 3-2 bracket. Not exciting because I watched them open a Rakdos Joins Up and a Rakdos, and I knew I was going to be in for a fight for sure. Just hoping that I could be aggressive enough to nullify the Rakdos in their deck. And thankfully, we were able to. Game 1, we were able to win. Taking racing and kind of being able to swing the race in our favor and kind of throw them off enough with the flyers. Thankfully, my opponent had the only out that they really had was somehow getting to double spell into Marauding Sphinx, but they didn't have enough mana, so ended up winning that game. Game 2, we saw the Rakdos. They played it on curve, and they were able to take a lot of my stuff. They ended up actually exiling my Forma Posse, and they ended up making like 5 mercenaries off of it. 4 or 5 mercenaries, and that was enough to kind of like tack on extra power to their creatures and make it pretty hard for me to be able to block and actually eat some of their creatures. We ended up at best trading, so it ended up being a little rough. Thought we had stabilized, but then they played a haste creature and a haste trample creature, and they were able to just kind of get over the last few points of damage as well. So pretty sad there. Going into game 3, fighting for our tournament life. Potentially top 8ing, prizes to top 12. So really playing for prizes at the bare minimum. Like winner is going to get $50 at least, maybe a spot in top 8. So game 3, we ended up kind of getting to keep their board pretty clear. They had one of the Cunning Coyote, and we're sitting with Stoic Sphinx and Marauding Sphinx, and I believe another creature in play, but like we're kind of looking to end the game here. They tap out for a Rakdos on their turn. They attack with their Coyote, pass the turn. They're sitting at 12 life. We're able to untap, draw, and we cast the Slickshot Lockpicker that we had put on plot a turn earlier. We ended up take for riding the Rakdos and kind of giving them the option to, if they want to sack and whatnot. They were tapped out, and thankfully that was enough to do exactly 12 points of damage to end up winning the game and kind of sitting there looking to sweat to see if we made top 8. I really, at that point, thought that it was going to be impossible. Maybe I ended up 9th and 10th. I thought my breakers were pretty good, and it was just all going to depend on how they went. And in the 11th hour, we finally, the round's over, and the standings get posted. Find out that we actually got 8th place, which meant that we were going to get into the draft and hopefully get to do some damage there. I did not take a picture of my draft deck. Not that I think it was like bad or anything, just something I didn't really think of. But we did end up losing in the quarterfinals of the draft. My opponent had a pretty sweet blue-white deck, and it ended up having Stoic Sphinx in that in it. So I was sphinxing people all day, and then it was my turn to kind of get beat down by the 5-3 flyer. That's kind of how game 1 went, and then game 2, was super grindy. But in the end, like my opponent and the Salamander, that used to just shrink things, just ended up shrinking my creatures way too much for me to actually be able to kind of handle their threats and everything, and ultimately ended up winning the game with that. It's a tough break overall, but that is my first top 8 in kind of like the RCQ era, and I believe only like my second or third official like RCQ played in as well. So for me, I'm pretty happy with what I did, or how I did rather, in the event. There wasn't very many like overt, like I don't think that there were very many mistakes, if any, that I made that I'm like, okay, I lost the game because I decided to do this instead of that. Thought we made some pretty sweet plays. Of course, kind of got to live the dream of, to play Forma Posse for a lot, and then getting to flash it back with a Slick Shot Lock Picker. We did have an Archive Trap in our, in our sideboard. And I thought about bringing it in a few times, just kind of cute to mill them for 13, untap, flash, play Slick Shot Lock Picker from plot, and then flash it back to mill our opponent for a bunch of a bunch of their library, which would have been really neat. And of course, it didn't end up actually working out that way. Just there was never a time where I felt like I wanted to do it, and I didn't want to dilute my deck, where I felt like I had some pretty good answers to kind of like what the format was kind of throwing at me. And overall, I think the limited format and I think the the draft and the sealed part of it are a lot of fun. There's a lot of kind of cool archetypes to build into. Even this kind of like blue-red, like incentivizing double spelling, and then this like blue-white, kind of like taking turns off and like forcing you to kind of do things on your opponent's turn if you want to play spells, didn't really clash. And there was never a time where I thought I wanted to trigger Malcolm on my turn while also wanting to trigger Gem Lightfoot as well, as like an example. And really, our deck was kind of built in a way where, we only played on our turn if it was absolutely necessary to play on our turn. And we had a lot of options of what to do on our opponent's turn, especially with like creatures and just getting to remove things. And of course, not casting spells from our hand, and even being able to cast a spell or two from our graveyard to trigger Gem Light, and of course, Inventive Wingsmith and things like that. Overall, super happy with the sealed pool. It definitely, the Sphinx was definitely a 5, and I think Marauding Sphinx is also like a really good card. I don't know if Malcolm is necessarily a bomb or even if Gem Lightfoot's a bomb, but I think I had two very good flying creatures that offered a lot of value and were able to close out games very quickly, and then just having some very solid to very good commons and uncommons into my pool as well to kind of like throw this deck together. Some pretty good mana as well. It definitely all came together, and I think this deck was probably better than a 4-2, but things just didn't roll my way. But, again, we ended up making top 8 and, just are that a little bit closer, getting a little bit of confidence going into, more of like what we're used to from like the RCQ season, and that's playing more constructed formats. I believe the Sylvan Factory as well, the owner was talking about getting, an RCQ at the towards the end of the season where it's MH3 limited, which might be something that we do. So if you want to see, me and Randy, because that's more than likely who will be going to that event. If you want to like have like a vlog style thing or what have you while that is going on, please be sure to like this video or comment down below if that's something that you want to see. Even like the community post I have as well, I'll probably make another one, in the near future if you want to see any vlogs and stuff from RCQs that we end up attending and kind of like what's going on and things like that. So that was my experience with Outlaws of Thunder Junction limited format. While we did not get the invite, we were pretty close. Technically like 2 matches away in a format where we basically knew nothing about it until like a week ago, and ended up being as fun of a format as I had hoped it was, and as not nearly as swingy. I feel like aside from like the games where you play like Stoic Sphinx on turn 4 on your opponent's turn, and then just get to hit them for 5 every turn while they kind of like struggle to deal with a flyer. While there was some games like that, I definitely had more games where it was more of a puzzle to try to figure out what was going on and how to navigate a turn, and some real decisions on, do I want to cast a spell now while I think it can resolve and maybe I won't get blown up by something like Snakeskin Veil or any like the counter spells in the format, or do I want to wait, get the value off of my creatures that care about me not casting spells from my hand, and just try to put my opponent in an awkward spot where they can't really like tap out anymore, what have you. Just all interesting decisions all day. It was very nice to kind of get back into that mode. My brain was definitely hurting me by the end of the event, but then I also was like, I kind of want to, draft this set again. I want to play in another limited format. I want to play in another limited event like this. So, that was my experience with Outlaws of Thunder Junction Limited. thoughts, opinions on the format, all that stuff. All great people, really great store. Definitely go check them out and everything in the Sylvan Factory Games in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Definitely worth checking out. Super nice store, really clean space to play, great judges, great owner. I would definitely consider going back there again. So yeah, that's going to do it for me this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please, again, leave a like on the video. If you enjoyed the video, you want to see kind of like some more, I guess, vlog type stuff for like these RCQs and things like that, either leave a comment, go to the community tab and comment on there as well. Whichever works. Of course, subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. Free, easy way to support me and my content. And if you would like to go even further, and support me monetarily, I do have memberships as well where you get access to some pretty cool perks. And I'd be looking to add even more perks in the future. But that is going to do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.